Welcome to our channel, where the stories of people from different eras and professions come to life. We are in magnificent Ephesus, right by the sea, where the great temple of Artemis reaches toward the heavens, and ships from all over the world fill the harbor. Subscribe, and after listening, be sure to share your impressions in the comments.
In the quiet countryside of northern France during the 13th century, life moved slowly, measured by the rhythm of seasons and the tolling of a small chapel bell. Young Elias was born into a simple peasant family in a modest village. The narrow dirt paths, worn by feet and hooves, the smell of wood smoke clinging to clothes, and the warm aroma of fresh bread from the oven, these were the first sensations that shaped his world. For a peasant child, existence revolved around the familiar fields, the dilapidated barns, and the daily chores. Yet Elias felt a different pull. He watched every passing traveler with wide-eyed wonder, imagining the distant worlds they carried in their stories and songs. His days were filled with helping his mother, fetching water, holding flax while she spun, or gathering kindling in the forest. Even in these ordinary tasks, he sensed something calling him beyond the hills. One rare evening, musicians passed through the village seeking shelter. That night, gathered in the elder's yard, the villagers listened spellbound as a tall singer with a rebec and others with drums and tales brought laughter and forgetting of daily worries. The music touched something deep inside little Elias. It was as if his soul recognized a greater nourishment than bread alone. From that moment, he began imitating the sounds, tapping sticks on an empty barrel, trying to capture rhythms that lived only in his imagination. His grandfather, old Gregory, played a special role. The old man told stories of ancient battles, kings, and wonders by the hearth fire, carving simple wooden figures that Elias saw as living heroes. "He who remembers the stories will never be lost," old Gregory would say. These words stayed with Elias forever. He began acting out the tales for other children, copying gestures and voices. Though not always successful, the joy of creation bloomed within him. Childhood also held fears, tales of forest spirits, ghosts on old roads, and shadows that came alive at night. Yet Elias found comfort in his grandfather's wisdom. Prayer and kind words were stronger than any darkness. Instead of succumbing to terror, he imagined songs that turned the howling wind into a friend. This habit of transforming hardship into melody took root early. As Elias grew into his teenage years, the familiar routines of village life began to feel like a tightening cage. The boy who once tapped sticks on a barrel now helped with heavier labors, harvesting crops, carrying heavy jugs of water, driving the cattle, and sometimes pulling the harrow alongside the adults. The peasant existence in 13th century northern France was one of endless repetition, rising before dawn, kindling the hearth, attending services at the modest wooden chapel when the bell rang, and paying taxes in grain when the Lord's collector arrived. Yet inside Elias, a different rhythm was forming. Everyday sounds, the creak of wagon wheels on stones, the hiss of wind through cracks, the clink of a wooden spoon against an earthen bowl, transformed in his mind into the seeds of future melodies. He had no real instrument or teacher, only persistence. He would hide by the fence or in the yard, tracing imaginary tunes on tree bark with a thin stick and murmuring words that echoed the songs he had heard. When another group of travelers, merchants, and a singer with a high, clear voice stopped in the village, Elias listened with his mouth open. The singer spoke of noble weddings in distant, stone-walled cities. For the boy, this revealed the power of a wandering performer. Songs could carry news and connect isolated villagers to the wider world. That idea took deep root. In the evenings, while his mother stirred the pot, Elias whispered invented tales of knights, bridges, and distant lands to himself. The adults sometimes laughed at his daydreaming, but the neighboring boys who overheard his improvisations gave him the first taste of an audience. Instead of shrinking back, Elias sang louder. The laughter did not stop him. Rather, it strengthened his strange inner certainty that the road was calling him. Daily chores did not hinder this inner growth, they fueled it. Gathering firewood in the forest, he listened to branches knocking together and turned the sounds into rhythm. Carrying buckets from the well, the clinking of iron rings became a beat. A sudden summer rain during harvest left a lasting impression. The sound of drops on wheat stalks, the shouts of adults, the smell of wet earth, all merged into an image of earth and sky, united as one. From such moments, his first simple songs were born. By his late teens, the contrast between outer life and inner world had become sharp. Outside, endless toil and sameness. Inside, growing imagination and the clear feeling that he could not remain only a peasant. Even if the whole world demanded he follow the old ways, a different path already sang quietly within him, beginning not with the plough, but with a soft melody in the dark corner of the hut. When Elias reached the age of 17, the narrow life of the village had become an unbearable cage for him. The boy who once imitated traveling singers was now almost a man, strengthened by years of hard field work. Yet his heart refused to accept the fate of repeating his father's path. The weight of invisible walls pressed upon him daily. One evening, after watching the tax collector arrive with armed guards and seeing the grim faces of the villagers paying in grain and livestock, Elias made his decision. "I must leave," he told himself. It was not betrayal of his family, but a search for another destiny. He gathered a small bundle, a piece of bread, his mother's scarf, and the old rebec that old Gregory had given him, with the words, "Every road begins with something small. Let this be your companion. Perhaps it will feed you better than the fields." That night, while the village slept, Elias slipped out of the hut and stepped beyond the familiar edge of the settlement, no longer as a boy with a jug, but as a man entrusted with the road by fate itself. The first steps along the dusty path were a strange mixture of light excitement and deep fear. Behind him remained the hut, the smell of hearth smoke, and the voices of his family. Ahead lay only stars, vast open space, and the sounds of night owls. His first night under the open sky was a harsh trial. There was no roof, no familiar warmth, only cold earth that chilled him to the bones and overwhelming silence. He tried to fill the emptiness by playing quiet notes on the old rebec. This became his first song of wandering, awkward and halting, yet in that moment he understood that his voice and strings were the most reliable shield against loneliness. In the following days, Elias learned the real value of bread. In the village it was ordinary. On the road, every crumb was precious. He exchanged his first short song for a bowl of stew at a roadside hut and felt genuine surprise. His words and music, once useless to anyone, had suddenly gained weight and become a means of exchange, almost as valuable as grain or salt. This moment finally confirmed his choice. The road was not kind. People were different. Some listened with curiosity and asked for songs for their children. Others drove him away, calling him a vagabond and idler. In such moments of humiliation, the rebec remained his only source of confidence. In one small village, the locals made him prove his worth on the square. He played a short ballad about spring and the awakening earth. No one applauded loudly, but they nodded approvingly and gave him bread and a piece of cheese. His first real reward as a minstrel. Memories of home returned at night. His mother's face, the smell of the oven, old Gregory's voice. Doubts crept in. Had he made a mistake by leaving safety for vague dreams? Yet every time he touched the instrument, the doubts faded. Music became the answer to fear and emptiness. Thus, the first weeks of adulthood turned into a test of freedom. No longer did he rise at his mother's call for heavy labor. Now, every day, he answered for his own life, learning to trust the road, to listen to every passerby, and to pay with his songs for bread, a coin, or shelter. He was beginning to understand that being a minstrel meant not only playing and singing, but also carrying stories, giving people news, tales, and comfort in exchange for what they could offer. The weeks of wandering gradually turned into a series of tests, discoveries, and first real defeats for Elias. The young minstrel who had left his native village now came to know the road as it truly was, unpredictable, harsh, and demanding of both will and body. Freedom, once his dream, required payment for every moment. Travelers with a rebec on their back did not receive the same welcome everywhere. Village crowds on the square might greet him with interest, offering bread and a mug of wine, or meet him with complete distrust. Why should we trust a man who neither plows nor pays the common tax? Some showered him with attention and asked for tales of distant wonders. Others hurled words like stones. You don't sow bread, don't carry water, yet you open your mouth for others' labor. Such attacks hurt, but Elias had already grown stubborn and had no intention of returning to his old life. Sometimes the road brought joyful surprises. In one settlement, a widow sheltered him and asked him to sing a cheerful story in verse for her children. The boys laughed and clapped, and for the first time Elias felt his music could change the atmosphere of a home. In another village, a craftsman lent him beads and requested a simple prayer turned into song. That evening became a small celebration. A simple melody united those who served God and those who sought daily bread. Yet heavy days were more common. In market streets he could be pushed, called a loafer, or driven out with a whip from under a shelter. It was painful not only to endure humiliation, but also to realize he was still too weak in his art. His songs did not captivate everyone. Sometimes the notes sounded dry, the words lost their power. Then he remained alone, with an empty stomach and aching legs. In such hours, doubts were especially bitter. Had he left home in vain? But each time he found salvation in the instrument. His hand reached for the strings, and a new melody was born as if in answer to fear. A true test and first significant success awaited him in a tavern. It was a small town where he arrived exhausted. The smell of hot stew, fresh bread, and sour wine came from the stone hall, along with shouts, laughter, and the clink of mugs. Hunger proved stronger than fear. Elias entered, removed the rebec from his shoulder, and asked permission to play. The tavern keeper, a stout and mocking man, looked him over. "Try it. If the people don't drive you out, you may stay till night." The first sounds were uncertain and almost lost in the noise. But Elias closed his eyes, remembered old Gregory's stories by the half, and let his fingers follow memory. The melody came alive. The rhythm grew firmer. He told a short tale of a knight returning home after a long journey. The hall gradually fell silent. People began to listen. Someone tapped the table in time. Others quietly picked up the chorus. When he finished, there was silence, followed by a roar of approval. The keeper handed him a mug of wine and a piece of roasted meat. It was his first real payment from an audience that could have driven him away or accepted him. That evening, Elias understood that the ability to hold a noisy tavern crowd was equal to victory in battle. One man with an instrument could command many hearts. Music was not only art, but also bread. With each passing month, the road ceased to be a novelty for Elias and became his constant companion, home, trial, and teacher all at once. The narrow confines of the village faded into the past, replaced by a new reality, open, changeable, full of meetings and partings. He was no longer simply escaping old burdens, but learning to become part of a larger movement where peasants, merchants, and wandering artists were connected by invisible threads. The colorful life of the road captured him more strongly each day. Once he joined a group of pilgrims in rough cloaks, carrying staffs and signs on their chests. They walked toward a holy shrine and sang joint prayers each evening by the fire. Elias sat nearby, listening and trying to reproduce their choral melodies on his rebec. Some words were in Latin, but the music left a deep mark. A more significant meeting occurred at a crossroads with 3 wandering singers. An older man with tired eyes but a confident voice, and 2 younger ones. It was Elias's first true encounter with people of his own craft. They stopped in a roadside grove, lit a fire, took out their instruments, and began exchanging songs. The elder sang a ballad about warriors who lost a northern fortress. One of the young ones played a cheerful tune about a fair and dishonest merchants. The third told a simple story about a weaver girl. Watching them, Elias felt both delight and longing. Delight at hearing true masters, longing because his own songs seemed poorer. When his turn came, he played a quiet song about his village, childhood memories, and bread smelling of oven smoke. The listeners fell silent. The elder nodded and said, "Do not chase after others. Your voice has something unique, your own shadow." These words stayed with Elias forever. That night, by the fire, he understood that a minstrel was not just a wanderer with an instrument, but part of an invisible chain where each carried experience and songs forward. In conversations over wine, they shared stories of being driven from cities only to be called back, or of fairs where a song earned more than a blacksmith's full day of work. The road taught him new skills, choosing words that even illiterate peasants could remember, strengthening his voice in market noise, and giving melodies weight when performing for nobles. Life on the road was simple but rich. A fire by the wayside, a jug of cheap wine, warm stew, branches for a bed. Yet there was always laughter, songs, and endless talk about people they had met, rumors and news. Minstrels were living chronicles, carrying tidings of fires, heirs born to lords, or lost battles. Elias learned to be not only a singer, but also a chronicler of the road. After many weeks, he reached a town, not huge, but noisy enough to astonish someone raised among wooden peasant paths. Stone walls, gates with the local lord's coat of arms, streets filled with shouting merchants, butchers carrying carcasses, and craftsmen hammering wood, leather, and metal. The noise was richer than any melody. For the first time, he felt the city could also feed him with song. Upon arriving in the town, Elias felt overwhelmed by its energy. Stone walls roughly built, wooden gates adorned with the local lord's coat of arms, and inside, bustling streets where merchants shouted prices, butchers carried carcasses, and craftsmen hammered away at wood, leather, and metal. For the first time, he realized how much richer noise could be than any single melody. The city lived at a different pace. People hurried, bargained, and never sat idle. Even a simple square felt like the heart of a many-voiced organism. Unlike the village where everyone knew each other, here people were merely particles in a crowd. This both frightened and inspired the young minstrel. As soon as he stepped onto the market square with his rebec on his shoulder, attention turned to him. Some called out curiously, others smirked mockingly. Soon the market overseer approached and asked if he could perform for the people. The city knew the value of entertainment. It distracted from heavy thoughts, enlivened trade, and drew buyers. Elias was allowed to stay on the square. He stood at the corner between a fabric stall and the pillar where decrees were usually read. His heart beat faster than it had in the tavern. Many people were around. None had come for him. He took out the rebec and began to play. At first, his sounds drowned in the hubbub, but gradually people stopped, then more and more. He sang a simple satirical song about foolish merchants trying to sell air at the price of grain. The crowd burst into laughter. Someone clapped him on the shoulder. Even the stall owners smiled, though they grumbled that he was disturbing trade. Imagine, a young singer who had recently slept on damp earth now held the attention of an entire market crowd. He was not showered with coins, but someone silently offered him a flatbread. Then another gave him a mug of cheap wine. For the first time, he clearly understood the city could also feed him with song. City life quickly revealed new sides. Interests of different people crossed here. Craftsmen discussed order quality, women argued about the price of oil, guards roughly dispersed beggars, and young scribes copied documents for merchants near the square. Elias was amazed at how many layers society had. In the village, there were peasants, the elder, and a rare tax collector. Here he saw a real ladder, from a poor shoemaker to a merchant with a gold ring. He made acquaintances. He became friends with one craftsman and slept in his attic in exchange for songs for the children. Merchants, accustomed to hearing news, began asking him, "What have you heard about the battle? What do they say about the king? What is the price of grain in the neighboring town?" Gathering rumors on the road, he passed them on like a messenger. Music intertwined with news, and people listened to him as a source of truth, even if half of it was only retelling others' words. Yet not everything was safe. One evening, while performing on the square, a quarrel broke out between two merchants. It started over the price of fabric, but turned into a fistfight. The crowd grew noisy. Someone grabbed a stone. Elias barely avoided being drawn into the chaos, and for the first time realized how fragile his status was. One wrong step, wrong word, or wrong song, and the audience that had just listened to him could turn into a mob ready to trample him. He stepped aside, hiding his instrument. Only when the guards separated the fighters did square life return to its usual rhythm. At night, he reflected that the city was like a song without end. Sounds never fell silent there. Even after sunset, voices, footsteps, and dull hammer blows could be heard. Lying on the hard attic floor wrapped in a rough woolen cloak, he listened and tried to turn these sounds into music. After months spent on the city markets and noisy streets, the road once again led Elias beyond the stone gates. He walked unhurriedly, rebec on his back, gathering stories and songs along the way. But soon his life took an almost fairy tale turn. The path brought him not to another village or tavern, but to a place where the fates of wandering minstrels rarely reached, the walls of a noble castle. It happened by chance. At a lively fair where merchants gathered from all around, Elias stepped aside and began singing a song about the harvest festival. His voice was joined by children, and soon a group of listeners formed around him. Among them was a servant of a wealthy merchant connected to the local lord's castle. The man approached, listened attentively, and said, "My master loves entertainment, and guests are gathering in his hall today. Perhaps you should try singing before those accustomed to the best voices." These words sounded like both a chance and a challenge. The road to the castle was new to him. Shields with coats of arms, gates opening to an inner courtyard filled with the smells of stables and the noise of the armory. For a man raised among huts and fields, it all seemed like a theater of another life called power. Elias walked through the courtyard with his head lowered, feeling the heavy gazes of the guards. Inside the great hall, everything was even more stunning. It was lit by torches and candles. Walls were hung with patterned fabrics, wooden beams curved in fanciful shapes. Long tables steamed with lavish dishes. He was almost blinded by the gleam of silver cups and the bright clothes of the guests. Ladies adjusted their hair, men laughed at each other's stories, and servants poured wine. When it was time to perform, Elias was led forward. He stood before true knights and their ladies. Everything inside him trembled. His hands barely held the rebec. The hum of conversation first drowned him out, but with an effort of will, he drew the first notes. Instead of a light satire, he chose a ballad about a valiant knight who, after long campaigns, found peace in his native land. It was risky, too serious for a festive table, but the seriousness held their attention. Gradually, the voices quieted, faces turned toward him, and the lines wove into the once noisy hall, now absorbed in the story. Imagine, a youth raised among earth and log huts now dictated the mood in a hall where people decided the fates of hundreds. For a few minutes, his voice proved stronger than the clink of cups and laughter. When the song ended, there was no storm of applause like in taverns, but polite approval. Several knights exchanged glances. A lady by the far column quietly wiped her eyes with a handkerchief, and the castle lord himself tossed a coin in his direction.
That coin was heavier than all the others, not only in metal, but in meaning. It was a sign of recognition from power, however small. After the performance, he was allowed to stay and spend the night in the castle. For the first time, he slept not on hard ground or in a shop corner, but on a straw pallet in a servant's room. The walls themselves seemed to hold warmth and protect from drafts, yet his sleep was filled with reflection. Elias felt he was a stranger among stone and luxury. Yes, they had listened and rewarded him, but here he remained a temporary guest, merely a wandering singer from the road. Noble ladies might listen to songs for comfort, but tomorrow they would forget his name. Still, a strange feeling was born in his heart. Having seen the castle from inside, he understood that his art could sound even here, under the vaults where fates were decided. Music and word knew no boundaries of class.
He was not a knight with a coat of arms, not a merchant with wealth, not an abbot with power. Yet his voice could reach those who seemed to act only with sword or gold. After the castle night with its candles and the heavy coin in his palm, Elias returned to his constant destiny, the crossroads and paths. But now he walked differently. The castle experience had shown him that a wandering singer's voice could penetrate even stone walls. Yet the true life of his art waited outside, among people whose bread smelled of smoke and earth. The road became his home once more. On wayside inns, demand for him had changed. People gathered not only for songs, but for news. Merchants asked, "Have you heard the price of grain in the neighboring town?" Women inquired about rumors of new wars and whether knights would return. Even monks asked about church disputes in distant lands. Elias was becoming more than a singer, a living letter without seals, a messenger without title. His songs changed too. They no longer simply amused the crowd, but carried fragments of news. Through melody, he could tell of a young lord who had died in one castle, of a daughter born in another, or of a new market opened by the river crossing. People listened because in times when books and paper rarely reached ordinary craftsmen or peasants, wandering minstrels became the voice of events. Yet, not all tidings were joyful. Rumors of wars, rising taxes, and the greed of lords caused anxiety. Sometimes his songs, even delivered with subtle humor, were met with silence because people knew too well how painfully these messages touched their lives. For Elias, this became a new challenge: to convey truth without robbing listeners of hope. One memorable journey was a shortcut through the forest. Locals whispered of wolves and even more cunning bandits, and of unclean forces wandering among the trees. Elias walked carefully, listening to every rustle.
Autumn. Wet leaves underfoot, evening falling fast beneath the oak canopy, every shadow seemed alive. Instead of yielding to fear, he took out his rebec and played a quiet melody. It acted like a spell for himself, sound to protect, to warm, to drive away anxiety. Near the edge of the thicket, he met a peasant family hurrying to leave the forest. They recognized him as a singer and asked for news from neighboring lands. He told them of peaceful fairs and songs from the south, deliberately omitting darker tales of a knight's death and bandit raids. Seeing the children's shining eyes, he understood. Sometimes one must bring not the coldest truth, but the seed of hope. His small fame was growing. More often villagers recognized him. "That's the singer who told us about the heir's wedding," or "He sang about the fair so everyone laughed." For him it felt strange. He still saw himself as a simple wanderer. Yet people began to view him as a necessary part of their world.
He also realized that the audience quickly tired of the same voice. He began collecting stories more attentively, listening to market dialogues, questioning pilgrims, spending evenings with merchants by the fire. Every conversation became a seed for a future song. With this came a new sense of responsibility. A minstrel's word in song was perceived almost as tidings. If he added more pain, people would carry it further. If he added a note of hope, it too would travel the roads. He became more careful, learning to carry light alongside truth. The years of wandering brought Elias not only applause, but also the full weight of real hunger, cold, and exhaustion. By the age of 24, the wandering minstrel knew both the joy of market crowds and the bitterness of indifference and misfortune. Autumn had come, and the harvest in the northern lands was poor. Fields that once shone golden stood empty earlier than usual. In the villages, there was not even enough bread for those who had grown it. Elias depended on people's generosity, but generosity vanishes where hunger itself gnaws at the stomach. In one village, they refused him food, saying, "We have nothing even for our own children." In another, they offered only a piece of old crust, and that was considered generosity. He walked from door to door, but the doors remained closed. Illness walked beside hunger. Autumn mists brought hoarseness and coughs, and many lay powerless. In a village he entered at dusk, the huts stood silent as if empty. The air smelled of rotten hay and spilled stew. There he saw an entire family felled by sickness, a mother with swollen eyes and 3 children too weak to rise. Their quiet suffering silenced his instrument. How could he sing of nights or glad tidings when a cold hearth and soft moans filled the house? In those months, Elias first wondered whether he had been wrong to leave his family. Once he lay by the roadside, wrapped in a worn cloak, listening to the November rain lashing down. His stomach ached with emptiness, his fingers trembled, and moisture left rusty traces on the strings. That night, the thought came. What if the art of song is only naive emptiness, unable to feed either him or his listeners? All he had gained was fatigue and endless miles of longing. But fate sent a meeting that changed his view. He came upon a monastery. Stone walls rose above the river, appearing in the morning mist like a stronghold against the coming winter. At the gate, he met a monk, no longer young, with a thin face and gentle voice. The monk looked attentively at the exhausted wanderer and said, "You seek not only bread, but answers as well, don't you?" Elias stayed several days in the monastery. In exchange for songs, he received shelter, a bowl of stew, and a warm cloak. He shared his melodies, and the monks taught him psalms. In the stone silence of the corridors, under the tolling of the bell, he sang together with one of the brothers for the first time. Their voices, one bright, one low, merged into a chant stronger than words. In long conversations, the monk told him, "Every labor has its price. Farming feeds the body, prayer feeds the spirit, and songs connect the two. You think your words are empty because they cannot fill the stomach, but sometimes it is the word that gives strength to endure cold and rain. Is that not a small thing?" These phrases sank deep into his heart. He remembered the faces of people who had picked up his refrains in markets, the laughter of children, the tears of a woman in the castle. Perhaps his true labor lay not in wheat, but in giving strength to those who must continue onward.
After several days, he left the monastery a different man. The cold and need had not disappeared, but patience and understanding had been added to them. His path was not an easy road, but a long labor akin to plowing. And perhaps it was precisely in this wait that his true mission lay. He stepped along the tract again. Though the wind beat in his face, the strings sounded more confident. His songs became calmer and more serious. Even when telling of knightly deeds, the lines now carried the thought, "The world is full of suffering, but hope always stands behind it." One performance after the monastery became especially meaningful. In a village where everyone suffered from the poor harvest, he sang a simple ballad about how after a harsh winter, the earth again covers itself with green. No one applauded, but people sat quietly, and a gleam appeared in their eyes. He understood that even silent attention was a sign his song had become medicine. By the age of 30, many peasants had not even reached this age, but for the wandering minstrel Elias, it marked an important milestone. Behind him lay not only hundreds of miles of roads, but an entire life woven in songs. He had known the cold of hungry winters, the joy of market crowds, and even a brief moment inside stone castle halls. All this had accumulated within him like a heavy book, whose pages he could now turn for his listeners. His singing had changed. If earlier he had mostly repeated legends heard from other singers and rumors from the roads, now his own voice and experiences appeared in the words. He began collecting stories himself, observing people in villages, listening to craftsmen's conversations, remembering intonations and tiny details. These fragments turned into songs, and it was no longer others' words that sounded on market squares, but his own ballads. In one town, he performed the story of a widow who had single-handedly raised 3 sons and sent each to serve without breaking under fate. The tale was invented, yet in the eyes of the listeners, he saw recognition, as if each remembered someone from their own life. Another time, he sang of an old blacksmith who had spent his life forging horseshoes and whose labor ultimately saved a small community. These simple plots were born not from knightly legends, but from the everyday life around him. Once, after such a performance, a boy of about 15 approached him. His clothes were poor, his hair tangled, but his eyes shone with the same spark that had once burned in Elias himself. The boy asked, "Teach me, I want to sing like you." At first, the wandering minstrel was surprised, for he himself had never had teachers. He had walked the road by feel, trying and erring, but in this boy he suddenly saw his former self, the child sitting by the hearth and tapping a stick on a barrel, repeating foreign sounds. From that day, they walked the road together. The boy, whom Elias named Lucas, proved patient, though his hands trembled when he pressed the strings of an old instrument they had obtained from a craftsman. Elias taught him not only words and melodies, but also a way of looking at the world. Look not only at the field, but at how a person walks across that field. There is the story, he told his apprentice. Not everything went smoothly. Sometimes the audience laughed at the boy's inexperienced attempts, and he would hide his face in his sleeves, ashamed of his weak voice. But the elder encouraged him, repeating the words the monk had once said to him, "Patience is part of the song. Without patience, a note will not sound." Thus he passed on what the difficult years had taught him. Traveling together was completely different from solitary roads. Now food was shared between 2, but there was no loss in it. Bread divided in half became sweeter, and even the cold felt softer by the fire when another voice sounded nearby. Gradually, young Lucas memorized lines and fragments of melodies and began to join in the refrains at markets. Sometimes the audience accepted him better than the elder, and this brought only joy, not jealousy. It meant the voice would live longer than the body. Elias began to reflect that true fame lay not in coins or memory among nobles, but in words that could be picked up by another and travel further. He remembered his grandfather, old Gregory, and his tales. What once seemed a child's game by the hearth now sounded in songs laid upon strings. And so it would be with his own ballads. The apprentice would carry them where he himself might never reach.